So if you can cast your mind back to what would have been last Thursday, I introduced the second part of the orientation to these 38 blessings or enlightened living. And at that time, I think I left you on the note that there are 10 levels, like a staircase, of different things that can be cultivated. If you can cultivate them, then they predict that good things are going to come into your life. And each of those 10 steps has several virtues or blessings included in them, sometimes 3, sometimes 4. And what we're going to do today is to start on the very first step, which is called the first grouping of blessings, and it has 3 in it. The theme of this first step on the path of the blessings is turning your back on any previous unwholesomeness in your own life. So you can imagine if you're a person who is coming from a dark place, or a person who is coming from a place where they really don't know the ropes in terms of spiritual cultivation and they're feeling around for a direction, then this is where they start. And I'm not sort of going to patronize you by saying that you really need this, but at the same time you may need to examine yourself to see whether there are still elements of these which are perhaps holding you back from your own spiritual cultivation. So turning your back on any previous unwholesomeness in your life, and consists of 3 things to train yourself in. And the reason that these are grouped together is because that any goodness you get from your human environment tends to come as part and parcel of the people who you brush up against, or you know, or who you look up to. Because the goodness doesn't come floating through the air, it comes along with the people who you know, who influence you, who set your norms in life, who give you all your expectations about life. And a lot of this comes from people who are exemplars and influencers in your life, because for most people they don't really know what goodness is, even if they were to go looking for it. So they can't see goodness in the world around them, but possibly they can tell the people who have goodness by looking at various features of those people. Or on the other way of looking at it, they can tell the people who maybe lack those qualities, or who might be a bad influence. So they can't see the danger in those bad influences, but maybe they can spot the sort of people who might be like that. And this is where a person might start, especially children. So this is because goodness is rather an abstract quality, and most people just have their own opinions about what's good or bad. So it's difficult, if you're running blind, to be able to pick out the sort of things that you're interested in incorporating into your own character or your own sense of training. So being able to recognize people is the first step on this ladder of blessings. The first of these is to avoid the sort of people who are habitually mixed up with unwholesomeness in their lives. The second step is to turn towards people who might be a positive influence in life. And the third one is to celebrate those who are habitually good. So it's almost entirely to do with how we select our friends. Friends in a broad definition of the term, because those friends might be our family, they might be our colleagues, they might be our teachers or students. And we come today to start off on the first half of blessing number 1, which is called not associating with fools. So for the 38 blessings of life, although all of them are important, but you could argue that a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a first step. And this is the first step on those path, at least of 38 blessings. And not associating with fools is something which, if you get it right, then it sets you off on the journey in a productive way. How you would spot such a person who is a bad influence sometimes depends on what that person sees as profit in life, because that will determine where they channel their efforts. If they are an entrepreneur, then they might define profit in life in terms of economics. If they are a criminal, then they might think about profit in life as cracking the world's most impenetrable safe or ripping off as many people as they can, so that might be their idea of profit. So although people seek success in their various ways, then mostly it comes down to what they think of as profit in life. Depends on what they see as normal or at least good enough. So not saying that criminals are necessarily subpar people, but they got a wrong definition about what normal or good enough is in life, and that's all their other actions and habits in life follow from that. So how a person defines what they're trying to get out of life or what is beneficial, it determines a lot of important things. And this is why you can't assume things like common sense is something that everyone is going to have. So the sort of common sense that leads people to try to do better things with their lives is called by the sort of technical term discretion. Discretion being able to tell the difference between something that is beneficial or harmful for your future. And the idea of these first group of blessings is that people who are fools don't have this, but people who have wisdom, they have this discretion. So it's a personal quality which we hope to have for ourselves one day. We might already have it, or we might not have it yet. It may be nascent in our personality and gradually being formed and calibrated and influenced by the people around us. But the way we calibrate it comes as a result of the transactions which we have with other people, what that teaches us, how we form that sense of discretion, which we might call common sense, but sometimes it's not that common. So the origins of where people can get this sense of discernment come from nurture in some part and nature in other parts. So you've heard the nature-nurture question. The nurture part is that we get discretion from the influence of what brushes off on us from the people who are closest to us and who we look up to often. The nature part is the part that we bring to the equation ourselves. It's the part of our innate ability to recognize things which are the truth or not the truth in our lives. People might give us advice, but in the end we have to decide for ourselves whether we believe it or not. And this ability in Buddhism is sometimes called the ability to be a good teacher to yourself. It's called by the Pali term yoniso manasikan. So we don't have that usually in the beginning, but we gradually develop it. Especially meditation helps us to develop this quality. But if we have it, then even if we get bad advice, then we can still turn it around into something that is accurate. If we don't have it, then even if people give us the right advice, we end up getting the wrong end of the stick. So, generally speaking, between the nature and the nurture side, in the very beginning, the nurture is the bigger influence. And it brushes off as part of the people around us. And as we may lack maturity in the beginning, then we may be warped or derailed from our pathway of developing this ability to be a teacher to ourselves or to develop discretion if we get bad influences right at the beginning. It's like you might have a splendid palace which you built, but if you build it right next to, let's say, a shanty town, and the shanty town catches fire, then your wonderful palace, no matter how great it looked at the beginning, also burns down. So it's by the proximity to risk or danger that you may waste all the efforts you've done in building a bright future for yourself. So by the same token, to associate with a person who has a very negative influence, no matter how good we might be originally, it may be burned down, just as that palace was burned down next to the shanty town. So this is a metaphor for how a virtuous person can be destroyed by associating with fools. So every time we have a transaction with another person, it's like there's a tug of war which goes on between us and them to see whose sense of discretion is going to brush off on who. In a situation where people are unable to sort of be selective about what they adopt from the next person and what they sort of put up a barrier against, then it tends to work rather like osmosis. So, flowing from a high point of concentration to a low point of concentration. If person A has a lot of good discretion and person B has less of it, then person A's good discretion will brush off on person B. If person C has a lot of bad discretion or inaccurate discretion and person D less of that, then person C's bad discretion will brush off on person D. So for adults, generally we are not quite so naive as to let anyone's habits just brush off on us without any sort of say in the matter. But for people who are new to this whole business or who don't know what to look out for, then they are particularly vulnerable of picking those habits up. And we do our best to pick up only good habits and avoid the bad ones. In that way we can have transactions with others without losing our own sense of goodness in the meantime. It's rather like visiting someone in hospital who's got a fever. You can visit them, you can talk to them, you can console them, but you would probably not want them to sneeze over you. Yeah, so you know where to draw the line with such people. However, some sort of illnesses are so strong, so contagious that you can't even come close to them, like plague or whatever. They need to be put in an isolation ward. People can visit them, but probably through a perspex screen or whatever. So the equivalent in terms of people's sense of discretion brings to mind the word grooming, which you would have heard about in the news recently. Actually, this word used to have quite a nice meaning, but these days it's rather difficult to countenance it anymore. We tend to think of it in the context of people where there is such a great danger of people being manipulated by another person. So if someone's very impressionable, as children are, then in the very contagious context there, then they can't afford to be even close to that person. So purveyors of faulty discretion are a great obstacle as we try to acquire any other blessings further down the path of the 38. The word fool comes up because it's a translation from the Pali word, Pali like Buddhist scriptural language, the word bala, which means a fool. And just to illustrate the sort of person I'm talking about, I tell you a little story. So in the time of the Buddha, there was an elder monk. This is the one in the picture here. His name was Mahakassapa, or Kassapa, you may have heard of him. And that's a traditional picture of him. So he was respected not only by all the other members of the monastic community, but even by the Buddha himself. The Buddha actually shared his own robe with this monk. He was, he felt he was very much on the same sort of level of knowledge. And as was the norm in the monastic community, then senior monks would accept novices as their attendants, in order that those new monks could learn the ropes and receive training in close proximity to those senior monks. So some of the elder monks accepted more than others, in keeping with their ability as teachers. Because Mahakassapa was a great teacher, then he accepted several of these novice monks. But it turned out that amongst the number of the novices he accepted, there was a very stubborn one. And his name was Ulunka Sadaka. And he wouldn't listen to anyone's advice. On winter evenings, it was the duty of the novices to boil water for the elder monks to take a warm bath in comfort. And this stubborn novice would never boil the water for Mahakassapa, even though it was his duty. And he would always leave the chore of boiling the water to the other novices. Meanwhile, he would go himself to the monk and say, "Oh, I invite you now to take your bath," as if he'd done all the work himself. So one day, in exasperation, all the other novices heated up the water for Mahakassapa's bath, and then they hid most of it in the back room. So when Ulunka Sadaka saw the steam rising from the bath, he went to inform Mahakassapa in a very obsequious way that his bath was ready. So the elder monk came to his bath and looked in, and there was a little bit of hot water right at the bottom. And the elder monk asked, "Oh, so where is the hot water then?" And the Ulunka Sadaka, he dipped the ladle in, and the ladle rattled around in the water. The novice's deceit became obvious at this point. And he got stuck with the nickname at that point of Ulunka Sadaka, which actually literally means rattling ladle. So everything else the stubborn novice did was in the same vein. Instead of going on alms round to collect food with the monks in the morning, if he fancied something special to eat, then he would claim to the temple supporters that Mahakassapa, this great monk, he really needs to eat this special such and such. And when they brought whatever special food that was, whatever delicacy, then he would eat it himself. Yeah. And Mahakassapa, he knew what was going on. And he warned this stubborn novice to be so lacking in respect is not in keeping with having taken ordination. You must train yourself better in the future. And Mahakassapa warned the stubborn novice continuously, but the only effect of the criticism was to make him feel as if his master was singling him out for unfair criticism. So he took it personally. The more advice he received from the master, the more victimized he felt. Instead of feeling grateful for all the patience his master had shown him, he planned on getting revenge. So next day, instead of going on alms round with all the other novices and his master, he stayed behind until no one was left in the accommodation. And then he set it on fire, burning it down before running away. So by the time the Venerable Mahakassapa and all the other novices returned from their alms round, all they found was the accommodation reduced to ashes. So this is an illustration of the dangers of associating with people who have the personality of a fool, who get angry even when spoken to decently. Namely, this novice Ulunka Sadaka, who put his own master's accommodation into the torch, even though his master had only ever spoken kind words to him. And this is one of the identifying features of a foolish person, and the reasons why we have to beware of this sort of person, and why, even though it would seem to be compassionate to give everyone an equal chance, but the Buddha suggested that in this case, even Mahakassapa, this great monk with his wonderful meditation and all these teaching skills, would be better not to have taken him on in the first place. So a fool, by definition, is someone who is perceived as wicked, but also weak and feeble. And they're made feeble by the fact that they habitually say, think and do things which are unwholesome. And the gap in their common sense allows them to justify unwholesome behavior simply because their mind is not centered. And to call a dangerous person a fool might seem like a bit of an understatement, because some of them might seem a bit like psychopaths or even clever manipulators. So how can we use the term fool or feeble? Well, they're like a person with a serious disease, is weak. We don't fear them on the basis of their strength or knowledge or ability to think, but we fear them because they are contagious. So any person can have 4 sources of strength or power in their lives. The first of these is physical strength. So any healthy person with plenty of muscles already has this first quality. A second power a person might have is the strength of their knowledge, which is derived from education and life experience. So having the ability to apply your reasoning to useful subjects is a second storehouse of power. The third strength is the strength of thought. Some people go through the same classes together, they have an equal amount of knowledge, but they don't use or apply their knowledge equally. Some people may know how to fix a car engine, but they might sit around all day idly, and they don't offer their services as a mechanic, they don't go into manufacturing, they just sit around all day waiting for someone else to find them a job. So why is that? Well, they got the first 2, but they haven't got the third one. And this is why if anyone uses both their strength of knowledge and their strength of thought, then they are at a great advantage, because they're endowed with the third storehouse of power as well. But the fourth and final one is the strength of virtue. So when one has all the physical and thought and ability to apply that knowledge as well, to bring benefit to oneself and others, if you apply it also in a way that is wholesome and beneficial to yourself and others, then you could say to be endowed with that 4th storehouse of power. So the strength of virtue. And everyone has the potential to have all 4 of these. Even if someone is endowed with only some of these 4, then already they stand a good chance of having a successful life if they got the last one. However, if a foolish guy has the first 3, maybe they are physically strong, maybe they got a degree in chemistry, and maybe they got the inclination to apply their knowledge, but they apply their knowledge of chemistry for dishonest purposes, such as like these Breaking Bad characters who go and cook up meth, then they undermine their potential. So they're a bit like a 4-cylinder car that's only running on 3 cylinders. And if you end up like that, then you need urgent repairs, otherwise your engine is going to seize up. So the fools present a risk not only to themselves but also to the people around them, because it's catching. And as we should see that we need to be able to recognize these people who have these foolish qualities, because it's the simple lack of the 4th strength which people can have will end up spilling over into the sort of way people around them start to think as well. Like, oh, well, he's not doing anything with his knowledge, well, maybe I won't do anything with mine either. Or misapply it, or put it into all the effort into things which are actually damaging, or leading them into sort of the underworld of life instead of into something which will lead to a brighter future. So this time, I have given you a little bit of a brief introduction to what we mean by fools, maybe how to identify some of these fools. Next time I see you, which I guess will be on Tuesday, I will introduce you a little bit more to the character of these fools, how they offer a sense of false friendship to people, this, in keeping with this idea of grooming and whatever, manipulative sort of friendship, and also how we can best insulate ourselves against the influence of such people in our lives. So I will save that for the next time. And in the meantime, for today, I think I will leave it there. Yes.
Everyone here about the fool, the personality of the fool.
Yes. It can be. If you think about yourself as an impressionable person starting out in life, then anyone who spends time with you has an influence on you, because as a child you don't have any barriers. You're like, you don't have any sort of guile as a young child to really stop yourself being influenced by the people around you. So if your parents have a good influence on you, then that's great. But if they are firing on 3 cylinders and they don't have the 4th one, then they're going to teach you all the ways to rip people off in life. That would be the way they would define success in life. So that would have an influence on you from an early age. It doesn't mean it can't be undone, but it's a general trend in the direction of, since that's all you've known from an early age. But what we will see is that, it's not just our parents. We may go into school and get a good teacher who sort of pulls us back from the edge, if we're lucky. Or we might get in with a bunch of really bad teachers, in which case, it might be left to our friends, or it might be left to whoever we partner up with in life, or it might be left to, let's say, the temples and churches to put you on the straight and narrow. So there are other possibilities for how you can be redirected, but the reason they start with this is that from the very beginning, it's whoever we come across, we accept it from them without any sort of ability to protect ourselves, unfortunately. So if we are a parent, so if you turn it the other way around, yes, we will need to start to be careful not just of the example we're setting, but also maybe keep an eye out for the sort of friends who our children have as well, because that can have a big effect. Yeah.
Right.
But parents spend a lot of time with their children, therefore they are a big influence.
Mm.
Yeah, it's not normal, but it's a big negative influence, which they are then going to have to deal with and hopefully repair at a later age. But it's said that children pick up a lot of habits from the age of up to 3. So you can imagine, like, by the time they're 3, it's like their destiny is pretty much set in stone if they've had a bad influence in that first 3 years. Some children spend more time with their grandparents, in which case the grandparents might be their sort of the golden ticket out of all the problems that they have with their parents. Well, generally, grandparents have that life experience and generally a slightly more calmer view of life. John?
John,
Well, we are lucky to be able to look at a situation and say, oh, well, we are luckier than them. But if you're in that situation, or let's say you are trying to lend a hand in that situation, then you should be asking yourself, how can I make a difference here? How can I get them out of that vicious cycle? And this actually gives you the answer that you need to pull them out of that whole human environment where that is the norm. And this is why things like education and gainful employment and things like this as a whole alternative to that alternative economy is so important to have that stability. But what this would say is you have to make the break with that so that you can turn towards something better. And for as long as that is what's in your face and that's what you're looking at and that is your life, then you're not going to see anything better than that, even though it might be right beside you. So, yeah, how you make the break, well, this is something we haven't discussed yet, but what I'm going to be saying is that it is to do with putting psychological distance between yourself and whatever those other influences are, rather than shunning those people. Yeah. Yes, Eva?
Yes, Viniva. Yeah.
I was going to ask a question. How can a foolish person learn from these teachings?
Well, a sneak preview is that although we might say, oh, well, those fools, I would never be like that. And in fact, we are all like that, at least in some part. And the fool in us is a part of us which we are also working with to stop listening to that side of ourselves. And the meditation we do is a way of listening preferentially to the more wise part of ourselves and turning away from the foolish voice within ourselves. So we have it within ourselves to a greater or lesser extent, but what you listen to the most, that is the part of yourself that will win eventually.
Mm-hmm.
So there are fools like out and out, but that's what I've sort of started to talk about today, the sort of people who burn your house down. But actually there is a fool closer to home, which I'll talk about more next time.
Mm-hmm.
May I then just add that if
Well, there's I got a story about that too, but that's in 2 sessions' time. Yeah, foolish monk who's like, you don't want to know this monk. Yeah, keep them at arm's length. Yeah. Yes, there's examples of them all. Any person who hasn't got to enlightenment yet, they still have a risk of succumbing. So beware. Well, it comes down to habits. And the good news is that at least habits can change. They're not sort of hardwired, but they're not easy to change. That's the trouble. So there's a lot of work involved. So there is light there at the end of the tunnel. But this whole sort of categorization is a way of making it simple for us to get to grips with the habits we have, rather than being completely blind and in the dark about which direction to go in. So that it allows us to see which way to go in the tunnel.
There is actually a saying, and I think it's biblical, that I'd rather walk alone than walk in the company of fools.
Yeah, I think I saw that one in...
Should we adapt that policy, or should we walk in the company of fools to give some influence?
Well, this blessing would say walking alone is better. But then you have to watch out for your thoughts, because there's foolishness in there too, which you can't walk away from. So in the end, you have to work with yourself, and it's not purely about other people. You shut the door of your home thinking you're safe now, but you're not. There's another one in your head.
Right. Has anyone experienced to associate with the fool, and you have got some bad thing happen to you? Please share, and what did you do? Have you ever experienced, associated with the fool yourself? And what did you do when you have that associated with that one? Good, good.
To be honest, I experienced what we're talking about quite luckily early on in life as a child. Keep the story quite short. We left school and someone piped up, let's all go to the shopping precinct. So a group of about 10 of us went to the shopping precinct, walked around the shops, quite innocently I thought, until we left one shop and then the store security So that's how it's influenced of sort of like being not alone, but very selective in going around with people. Yes, absolutely. And I'm quite fortunate that I learned that lesson quite early on as a child.
That benefits for you a lot, yeah. It's very benefits for you a lot. So, okay, how about Wendy?
Also, second time as well.
Oh.
I was fuming. How did I fall for that one?
Okay. Thank you, Ka. How about Wendy?
Yes, I have, and the detail of the story isn't very good. What I notice in myself I prefer to do is to notice deliberately with gratitude what I have learned
Mm.
from that. Why? Because I personally don't feel comfortable negatively categorizing people. What I do notice I'm more comfortable with is noticing with gratitude that that was a very useful lesson. No, they're no longer in my life. Yes, I have with gratitude learned something valuable.
Mm-hmm.
That's my translation.
All right.
Detail doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you so much. Anyone want to share or ask any question? Might be about your meditation experience or about the food.
Do you think it's possible that if you got used to the company before, that you could actually, by your influence, change into being more wiser person without the effect of it coming back on you?
Yeah, it is possible, but that's further up the stairs, further up the steps. And this is talking, this blessing comes at a time when you're not strong enough within yourself to be able to, in that competition with who's going to get whose habits, you're going to lose in the tug of war.
Mm-hmm.
But later on, when you become stronger in yourself, having cultivated more of the blessings up to whatever in the late 30s, then at that time you can then turn and be a good friend to others and help them to pull them out of their foolish habits. But in the beginning, you're not strong, and there's a metaphor of the drowning person in the water, and the obvious thing to do is to jump in after them, but you can't do that if you can't swim yet. So and then you get two drowning people. So they might feel better about that they're not alone drowning anymore, but for you it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Any meditation experience today to share? Kun Bob, do you have any meditation experience to share today?
I have, in the last few days, been a bit uncomfortable with my meditation because I've come up against a big oak door and it's all light behind that door and I can't open
Yeah.
it. And I stopped the meditation and come out because I didn't like the feeling of being locked in. Normally I can have a really nice meditation, but the last one the big oak door, I can't go through it.
Mm-hmm.
Make me feel really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to sit with it and wait for the door to open by itself. Sometimes you can't force the door open, but you have to wait for it when it's ready to open. Or maybe it's the wrong door, who knows? Yeah. So you have to enjoy your meditation even when it doesn't do what you expect. So, and then it can be something even better. But you need to make a space for it to change.
Kun Len, please share some in your inner experience, or you have any question for improve, for Patrajan can help you to improve your meditation. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, Kun Iwa, thank you.
I think when you're practicing meditation, no matter what you come up against, the process of practicing, just go through the process, is your meditation, is it not?
Sometimes we have expectations about what progress in our meditation is going to be like, and those expectations become obstacles to us. Especially if we've had a good meditation in the past, and we assume that the next good meditation is going to be the same as the last time. So whenever it looks like we're close to getting whatever that good experience was last time, we start trying really hard to make sure it does the same thing again. And there's this sense of inadvertently using more force than we need to. Whereas if you reflect on your experience and with a better understanding of how the meditation technique works, you learn to enjoy the meditation no matter what happens. And it's the enjoyment you get which actually is the meditation rather than the results which you are expecting or anticipating. Otherwise you get very fixed on results. It's actually about the journey. Or at least if you're able to tell yourself that, then it will be helpful to you on good and bad days in your meditation practice. Yes, or it may have been it might be a past good experience which you want back again, which is it is a subtle form of craving, which you also need to put to one side because craving brings suffering.
Kun Hiran. Yeah. So if yeah, he has no question. So how about you, Kun John? Yeah.
Sometimes just sitting with a meditation, even when there doesn't appear to be something happening, has that waiting has the effect of gradually letting things settle out and disappear, which are clouding your mind. And once they're gone, then they are gone. Generally, it's about letting things happen in your meditation rather than making things happen.
Okay, thank you. So I have one question to ask Phra Ajahn, because I used to have this question. They said we teach the meditation how to let go and try to let go everything. But why we teach or recommend the meditator to use like crystal ball as an object of meditation?
So,
It's not let go, just
so the question I think is, if we are letting go of everything in meditation, how come we need to use a particular object to focus on? And the answer is we need to start with something, but once we know our way to the center, then whatever we have inside will change and transform. So at that point, we are no longer fixed to what we originally had. And it was just a sort of deposit on the future meditation experience, which becomes then a flux of different things. So we are not attaching to a particular object, and many people use different objects. Even the center of the body, we are not attached to that either, because our teacher in Thailand says anywhere within the body is fine. The important thing is that it feels comfortable for us.
Thank you, Jaka. So we have about 10 minutes left. Maybe the last question or a recommendation or sharing from the floor. And then we will finish. Anything else? No? Oh, everything clear. Oh, okay, so today we have already meditated together, and I hope you have a good meditation moment or experience. Then we have an opportunity to learn about not to associate with the fool, which you cannot find it in the university, but in this temple, and tested by Phra Ajahn to help you. So we are so lucky. So as we are not perfect, and we try our best to help the fool as much as we can. But if we cannot do it, just leave them and then bring them to the temple to meditate. Yeah, okay. So in that, so for tonight, I will rejoice with all of your merits that you come to meditate and learn to live your life happily with Phra Ajahn today. Maybe pay respect to the teaching monk by could you please pay respect to our teaching monk by bowing 3 times? Bow, bow, bow.
So may all of your lives be free from the influence of fools, and at the same time, may the knowledge you have learned tonight help you to make strategic choices about the people in your lives whose habits you let brush off on you, in order to lead you quickly and swiftly to all the higher blessings of the 38 blessings with ease, now and forevermore.
Sadhu. Could you please pay homage to the Lord Buddha by bowing 3 times? Bow, bow, bow. Rejoice in all of your merit, everyone. I hope all of information that Phra Ajahn give it to you is help you to meditate. Your meditation will be progressed a lot. Yeah.